Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Commander Clash podcast, where we talk all things Commander. And this week, we are talking about basically Modern Horizons 3 cards we haven't talked about. Some of the underrated cards that didn't make our tier list, that didn't make the MDFC tier list. So the remainder of Modern Horizons 3, this is the last one. Join with me is Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. Seth, how you doing today?
I'm doing super good. This set is sweet, and I'm excited to talk about some of my favorite cards from it.
Tomer, Budget Commander, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm representing Krim. Krim couldn't join us today, so I have the blue hair.
Wait,
how
where-
am I so bad at aiming at it? There we go.
Where's the black?
Blue
It's
hair.
that's not Jameer.
I have silver in the back. I have silver in the back.
How-
Gray.
How long did it take you to do that? Was it a lot of work? Because that's a lot of colors all like arranged neatly.
So my boyfriend had the day off, and he offered to do it for me while I worked, which is great.
That makes
It didn't take that long though. It was just kind of like slapped it down. You know? Like, it was like maybe half an hour, I guess.
It turned out pretty good.
Yeah.
All right. Krim is not here. He has locked himself out of his car. He is wandering the streets of LA doing doing things.
Classic.
And
The
Tomer,
grim life, yeah.
if you're listening on the podcast, Tomer has the Pride hair from the charity stream. You can check that as a VOD on our YouTube channel if you weren't there live. There's a Commander Clash live included in there, as well as several games with several guests. So you should check that out. Okay. Before we get into today's episode, though, a word from our sponsors. You can use all the playmats, sleeves, deck boxes that you see on Commander Clash. You can get them from Ultimate Guard, premium protection for your trading cards. So you can check them out at ultimateguard.com. And then also Card Conduit, the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. You can skip all the time, typing, and work associated with buy listing. And you can use their curated service where you send in as many cards as you want with buy list value of $1 more, and you pay just a 5% service fee. You can use their sorted service where you list and sort your cards and pay only 2%. You get a detailed report and fast payment once your order is processed. Get 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/MTGGoldfish. So thank you to our sponsors. And it's time for the Ultimate Guard comment of the week. Last week's podcast, we talked about MDFCs and how we have no room for any lands anymore because all of our lands are spells. From Random LB 2442, you all should do a future podcast where everyone builds a mana base for the same commander, then compare and discuss the choices made. That is a great idea.
Mhm.
I think we're gonna
I
get
think
wildly
that'd be
different
fun.
results though, based on the cards we're gonna put in the 99. Because Tomer's gonna play like these like Island Matters cards or something, and he's gonna need like 8 islands in his mana base.
Heck yeah.
I think we got to start with the same 99, same non-lands. Like have someone else, like I don't know, Niantic or something, build us the 99 with no lands, and then we build the mana bases for it.
Okay, we can do that.
Mhm. Yeah,
could do
we could do
that.
that. Yeah.
But what
Then you
if they
tailor.
frame us, Seth? What if they put like 8 rampant growths in, and we're like, wow,
Yeah.
now I gotta play
Yeah.
8 basics.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of those things, like your mana rocks and the cards that aren't the lands are going to dictate what the lands are usually. So maybe I don't know,
Yeah.
we have to figure something out.
Like,
I
like
really
if you
like
play
the
the white
idea, though.
ramp,
The idea is
if you
good.
play the white ramp, your mana base looks very different than if you didn't play the white ramp, right? So
That's-
Yeah, or you play
we'll
like
figure
an
it out.
extra planar lens, you know, like you want to have more bases. So-
Okay, that's a good idea. We'll figure it out. We'll get that done. So let's jump into today's podcast. Underrated Modern Horizons 3 cards. There are a lot of cards in this set, and we can only hype up so many. Some of them slip through the cracks. So here we're going to attempt to fix that. I got a good card for you guys. Phil's not here. This is honorary Phil card. Planar Genesis. Green and a white, 2 mana value instant. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land from among them onto the battlefield tapped. If you don't, put a card from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is just
This-
better rampant growth, right?
No.
No.
No. Really?
No.
Better rampant
Wait,
growth? Is it?
No.
I-
Okay, hold on. We're gonna do the math real quick. I gotta do the math real quick. But so the idea is if it gets a reasonable hit for lands, right? Then that's a rampant growth that lets you get non-basics. MDFCs mess with that math, which I'm about to do in a second. But late game, it's a tutor. Tutor, right? It's a top 4 search. It's an impulse to grab something that you can then play.
I mean, it's an impulse, right? It's an impulse, but you can put the land into play if you hit a land. I did the math real quick. 33 lands. Let's say 33 for the Richard MDFC mana base. 80% that you will hit a land out of it.
That I think that's good.
Pretty good. That's pretty good,
and
right?
you don't have to play basics. Perfect.
But like, I don't
go to 37 lands, Seth. Do the 37 for me. What if you played an honest honest mana base?
You don't
an honest Tomer mana base. You go up to 85%. 85.
That's not worth 5%. That's not worth 5%. We go MDFCs.
And really, like, so even if you go to 25 somehow, you're still like 70%. So the math is actually not that bad. You're probably gonna hit a land. I like that it doesn't care about opposition agent, which is very relevant in our play group. It's like ramp that isn't tutoring. I don't know. What do you think, Tomer?
So this reads to me like the closest analog for me looks like Growth Spiral, which is just the same mana cost, instant speed. You draw a card, and then you could put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. I like that one a lot. I run Growth Spiral a lot, and there are some times where you draw a card, but you still don't have a land to play, and that kind of sucks. But usually, I don't know, it has a pretty high rate of just being like an instant speed explorer. How do you two rate Growth Spiral versus Planar Genesis? Because honestly, I feel like they're both comparable, but I don't know which one would be better. I'm sure there has to be like a math formula behind it, but like I don't know. I'm not a math person, so I'm not Simic.
So my non-mathy argument would be that I think that Planar Genesis is better for the reason we were talking about, which is you don't draw a card, which Orcish Bowmasters, Sheoldred effects are pretty popular in Commander, and then you also don't get got by the opposition agent effects. So I think they're roughly equal, I would say, as far as like their ramping potential, but I like that this avoids that stuff. And I also like that in the late game, this goes 4 cards deep instead of 1 card deep. So like once you get to the point where you don't really need an extra land, having it anticipate, I think, is much better than drawing an extra card in most decks. So I would play this over Growth Spiral, I think, every time. I don't know if I'd replace my Rampant Growth with it.
Respect on its impulse. So the reason why replacing Rampant Growth is hard for it is because it's Simic, right? You need 2 colored pips. For those counting, that's almost that's slightly easier than double green, but like not easy as green 1, right? So if you're trying to turn 2 this, you might have trouble in a 5C deck. But if I'm playing a 2 or 3 color deck and I'm not playing, Arid Archway and all that stuff to like make all this colorless mana, I think this is just better Rampant Growth. Like, you don't have to play basics. You know how big that is, Seth? I know you appreciate that.
Although it does play poorly with MDFCs in specific,
it
right?
Because
you can't put an
MDFC did the math at 31.
Play.
but
80%,
but you get the upside of the impulse in the late game or the mid game. Like maybe even forego Rampant Growth because your hand is all lands or something, right? And you want that impulse. I think that impulse is worth something.
Oh, it definitely
80% Rampant Growth and impulse. I take that.
I mean, I've seen people playing in Modern, and it's looked really good. I haven't seen it in Commander yet, but I've seen people playing in Modern, and it looked really good. So in Growth Spiral, EDH Rec has it at 22% of decks. It's kind of like pretty I didn't realize it was so stapley, but like apparently a lot of people play Growth Spiral. So if you're a Growth Spiral fan, I would definitely play this instead. It seems really good. Or alongside,
precon, it's in so many precons, and also it's also guaranteed finding the color pip you want, right? Like if you're 3 color and you have 2 of the colors and you cast Rampant Growth, you'll find that 3rd color every single time. This one is like not guaranteed, right? So there are advantages to Rampant Growth, but yeah, I think I would just run this alongside Growth Spiral every single time.
Yeah,
and I'd be happy with it. Yeah, it looks really good.
All right, but we never play Growth Spiral, so you guys actually play.
I play Growth Spiral.
How often do you play Growth Spiral though? Like very rarely, right?
I kind of feel like I should play it more. Honestly,
will this replace Farseek?
No.
Or Nature's Lore or something like that?
Definitely not Nature's Lore 3 visits. Those are like the S+ tier ones. I could see it replacing Rampant Growth, maybe. But those just like the land comes into play and
y'all don't like
it gets everything.
Y'all don't like Growth Spiral?
I think I should play it more.
I never play it.
Like,
I do Reddit index of care about it. Like Calamax, my arcane deck. Like, yeah, I could copy it with Calamax, so that's really good. But
it also just
Like
I mean,
it depends on how many lands you're playing too, right? Like, as I add more and more lands to my deck, the appeal of Explorers and Growth Spirals, I think, goes up more and more because when you don't have an extra land, they're pretty bad, right? When it's just 2-mana cantrip, you're very sad. But as long as you're putting a land into play, it's incredible. It's better than Rampant Growth, right? Because it's Rampant Growth that's also drawing you an extra card, which is really good. So yeah, I think I should play Growth Spirals.
You need to be a
Explorers
bounce
more.
land believer
There goes so
to
good
run
with
this
bounce-
above like a normal rampant growth or something.
who is
But-
not a balanced land believer in 2024?
The
though?
entirety of the YouTube comments, Tomer, your tempo is ruined. The entirety of the YouTube comments. They're like,
I think
great
people were
budget
just afraid
option,
of strip
guys.
mine. I think
Okay.
people were just scared of strip mine, but we got over it. But yeah.
Seth, hit us with
Oh.
the card.
I got even better ramp spell for you. I don't know why you're all getting hyped about this anticipate Growth Spiral thing, because Wizards gave us the best blue ramp spell that blue has ever gotten in the history of Commander in Copy Land. Copy Land, 3-mana enchantment,
Trace image.
enters the battlefield, is a copy of any land on the battlefield, except it's an enchantment in addition to its other types. So if you look at our Commander Clash games, what are some of the literal most played cards across our decks? Thespian Stage, Vesuva, lands that copy other lands. That's because we're all addicted to playing these busted utility lands. Someone's going to be flipping their Dowsing Dagger. Someone's going to play an Ancient Tomb. Someone's going to have a bounce land or some very strong thing to copy. So I play those two cards in every single one of my decks. No, at 5-color, monocolor, it's going to have Vesuva and Thespian Stage. Those are my two number one utility lands that I play. This essentially does the same thing for 3-mana, which 3-mana ramp isn't great, but it's blue. It's blue. Blue doesn't get rampant growth. Mono blue doesn't have access to better ramp spells, and it's in land form. So yes, it is an enchantment, which means in theory you could get got by enchantment removal. But how many people are going to spend their enchantment removal spell on a land? I don't think it's going to happen that often. And I know what you're going to say, Richard. Oh, Farewell. It's just going to get swept away because we had this conversation off cast before. So I know what you're going to say, but it's an enchantment, not an artifact. If it was an artifact, I could understand that criticism.
Saying enchantments are harder to remove than artifacts?
Well, no, people play Vandal Blast
Yeah,
type
they are.
effects, but
They're,
people don't
roughly
really
the
play
same, right? I mean,
mass
technically,
enchantment
yes.
destruction effects, right?
Red can deal with artifacts and cannot deal with enchantments, and I don't think black really deals with enchantments.
But green can deal with enchantments, and white, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
But I feel like you're gonna get by a Bane of Progress, so you dodge Ondu Inversion, because Ondu Inversion says destroy all non-land permanents. But you still get got by the Witch Enchanter, MDFC, Rex Sage. You get caught by a lot of things. You might as well just play a Mana Rock, no? One of your coveted utility Mana Rocks, like a bobblehead or something, right? If you're feeling saucy, you just play Worn Power Stone, and it's like you copy landed an Ancient Tomb without paying 2 life every turn, Seth. Wouldn't that just be straight up better?
So I've resolved this once so far in a game that will be coming up on the YouTube, and it copied a really powerful land. It stuck around the entire game, and honestly was one of the most important cards with how the game ended up playing out. So my experience so far, obviously the new card, we haven't gotten a ton of games with it yet, but the early results on this card is it felt insanely powerful to me. So I'm going to jam this in. I'm not going to play in a 5-color, I don't think, or whatever. But if I'm mono blue, I think this is going in my deck every single time because I think mono blue just doesn't have good ramp options.
Vitodic Manipulation and whatever that one mana spell is.
Image.
Retrace image.
Those
you
are
have
kind of
Darksteel
copium
Ingot,
too.
Skyclave
Those are kind
Relic,
of copium.
right? You
that's-
could...
We've got Solemn, we've got Wayfarer's Bauble. I'm actually with Seth that I think in metagames that are very utility land heavy, our metagame, I think it probably is worth it. If you know that Richard's just jamming Dowsing Dagger in every single deck, and you know that there's always going to be a black player who's going to be going for the Urborg Cabal Coffers thing, the stonks on this goes up. But I don't think it's in a vacuum, I don't think it would be jamming it just because 3 mana to yield most likely 1 mana is not a great rate. Even in blue, I'd much rather just run Mana Rocks instead that are 2 mana to do the same thing.
Ooh.
Because it is an enchantment, so it's going to blow up almost as much as an artifact. Yes, red can't blow up enchantments as well, but there is going to be white and green, and it's going to die.
Do you play, what is that? Command Sphere? Commander
Those are lane
Sphere? I
balls.
don't even know what it's called because we never play. It's like the 3-mana mana rock, but you can sack it to draw a card. So if you're
Sometimes.
like afraid, if you're afraid of the sweeper, at least you get a
We
card
used to be
back.
a big fan of that.
But
Right?
what everyone's understanding. Okay, yes, sure. If your play group is only playing basic lands or shock lands or something, yeah, this isn't that appealing. But we're in a world where someone's gonna have a land that's making 2 mana I can copy. Someone might have a land that's making like 10 mana that I can copy. Like the upside is just so high in a world where everyone's playing those like strong utility lands. And I would argue, even if you blow it up, if I get a Cabal Coffers for 2 turns, or even the flipped Dowsing Dagger for 2 turns, it's making 3 mana, it was probably still worth it. It's like a weird ritual with this land that made like 6 extra mana over 2 turns and then got swept away. I'm still probably fine with that in that scenario, honestly.
But so what about the other scenario where you copy a dual land and then next turn farewell?
Yeah, I mean that's the floor on the card.
If you get the coffers and the Urborg down, like, yeah, you're golden, right? But interesting.
Commander Sphere is
where's
ever
your
gonna
limit?
make one. It's only ever
2 color
make
decks.
one. This has upside.
Does this ever go into a green or a white deck?
Right now I'm in mono blue for sure, and I don't know. Maybe
what about red, black, the non-rampy colors? You'd play this then, right?
Yeah, in the non-rampy colors. I don't think once you get into green for sure you don't need this, but 2-colored blue decks I think are probably fine if you're not green. Like, is it? I would probably play it.
I'm excited to see Seth run it. Like, I think it's a cool card, and in our meta, I think it will have potential to be really good.
You guys are so high on the Witch Enchanter MDFC.
I'm not high on this card. I'm not running this card. I'm just excited for Seth.
I'm even scared of
run
Dowsing Dagger now because of Sundering Eruption, the red MDFC that kills lands. Now people have a free card that's just sitting around that they're willing to use.
That's in all my red decks, except for 5.
I know, right? It's getting scary now. It's getting scary now. All right, Silver, hit us with a card.
Okay, so you know how much I love my basics and how much non-basic lands have to do for me to consider taking out a precious basic of mine and replace it with something else. And there's one card, this one is the one that I'm actually the most high on after the Talon Gates, which we already talked about in a previous podcast. This land is getting me super hyped, and I'm going to be putting it in multiple decks. And this one is Spymaster's Vault. This is a land that enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp. You can tap it to add 1 black, and then you could pay 1 black and tap it. Target creature you control connives X, where X is a number of creatures that died this turn. And the key thing here is it's not sorcery speed, so you can also activate it on opposing turns. I find this card being fantastic in black decks because black decks are usually very heavy on graveyard synergies. They're very heavy on creatures dying. Like Aristocrats is the primary archetype for black. So in multiple black decks that I have, they either care about my creatures dying, killing your creatures, or filling my graveyard with stuff to utilize in different ways. And the mana efficiency of this is through the roof. Like if you have like 2 creatures dying, you attack, some blocks happens or whatever, and then you sacrifice a creature or whatever, and then you activate this and you connive 3 or something for 2 mana, essentially 2 mana. That's really solid for me if I'm not utilizing that 2 mana for anything else. And it enters the battlefield untapped like most of the time because it's just, like you'll have swamps and stuff. This card is like gas. And then on other people's turns, you can still utilize it too. So like if other people are attacking and blocking and sacrificing things or whatever, you can still connive on their turn if you didn't have a turn to set it up as well. Just like the fact that you can loot that effectively is really, really nice to me. And you can also like pump up a big creature at the same time.
Let me make sure I understand connive. So X is the number of creatures that died this turn, right? So you draw X cards, and then you discard X cards. So you're basically looting, and then you put a +1/+1 counter on the creature for every non-land that was discarded.
Yes,
you would pay 2 mana for connive 3. Like what? Like what?
Yeah,
so I understand if you're trying to fill your graveyard. Like if you're playing against a DC deck or something, and like you're filling the graveyard, like this is cracked, right? But you like attack, 2 creatures die, you connive 2 for like 2 mana. Like, am I missing something?
That's like
low
bar.
You gotta remember.
That's the low bar of it.
You gotta remember though, like it's formatted like Castle Lockwood, which I play in pretty much every mono black deck. How often do I want to pay 4 in some life to draw a card? Not that often, but when I do want to do that, I'm really thankful that I have it. I think that's where Spymaster's Vault is. Like, if you're conniving 1 or something and you have something better to do with your mana, or even if you're conniving 2 or 3 and you have something else you want to play in hand, then just don't activate it. And it's essentially just like a swamp, essentially. So I think in mono black, you have so much room for lands like this, and the ceiling's really high. If you've played Standard recently, you've probably played against Rafine, and just the ability to, like, Rafine comes down and attacks and, like, connives 3 or 4 times, and you just, like, lose to it. Like, the upside is there, I think. So I think it's actually really good. I don't think it's like S tier 5 color every deck good, but in like mono black where I'm playing enough swamps where it's coming into play untapped, I think I play like Castle Lockwood.
Like, if you can connive 10 somehow without your creature dying, like, if a connive 10 is happening, that means a wrath just happened, right? And you probably don't have anything left to connive with. But
it would be good in like a flat, like, obviously a Crim style deck. Like, imagine like you flash in like a Fairy Mastermind after a board wipe, and then you connive a whole bunch. That'd be like the dream, I guess, off a board wipe. But like the decks that I'm putting it in, for example, my 6-drop deck led by Tasigur, I don't care. Like,
because you have so much extra mana due to your
and then it feels delve in my Mastery Animation. I'm putting in my Venser Poison deck because it's all about sacrificing my hollowed 1 token all the time over and over again to proliferate, which makes another version of it. That's great.
Okay.
I'm putting in my Etrada deck because stuff is sacrificed all the time. Then my Teza deck is Orzhov Aristocrats. I'm always sacrificing my Spirit tokens for value. Free a Connive for 2 mana is excellent for me too. And then like I don't expect to activate it that early too. Like maybe turn 5, 6, then I'll start activating it, and it enters the battlefield untapped like 90% of the time because I run a bunch of swamps. So
I'm excited to see
I like
this.
it.
I'm excited. I'm surprised Tomer's so high in this. To me, this is like a activate 5% of the time card, and that's not worth cutting over a swamp. But if you're gonna activate it like every turn or something, then yeah, this is crazy.
Not every turn,
or if it's like a +1/+1 counter deck, like a Golgari +1/+1 counter deck, or like a milling where you need to self-mill yourself a lot. I can see this happening. But
I like that the
cutting a swamp for it,
low.
Yeah,
that's a high bar.
That's how you know Tomer
I gotta
likes
keep an
it,
eye on this one. This one's on the watch list. This one's like Seth. I can't take anything he says seriously. He cuts anything for everything, right? But Tomer cutting a basic.
I have another land on the list too. We'll get to later. So there's sometimes hot enough for me to actually cut basics, and it hurts.
I like
I'll
it.
do it.
All right. Sowing Mycospawn. 4 mana, green, colorless card because it has Devoid. It's a 3/3 Eldrazi fungus with kicker 1 and a colorless, and you have to pay the actual colorless mana. When you cast this spell, search your library for a land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle. When you cast this spell, if it was kicked, exile target land. S. This is like this is like an S that didn't make it on any list. This is everything green wants. It's a 4 mana 3/3. It's a blocker. It ramps, and it gives you 3 power in case you have to like desperate card draw on turn 5 with like a power card draw, right? But like a 5 mana draw 3, I take it every time, right? So, and you can get a Tempo the False God. You can ramp 2 mana, and then late game you can kick it to get rid of those annoying Lost Veils and Vasoviths and all that stuff. This is this not S? S?
I think it gets any land, right? So it's 4 mana, get any land. It comes into play untapped even as an extra bonus. It's not even going into play tapped. So you get any land. You can play this, and like we don't do this because Tomer made us ban this card because of Vince, but you can play this, get your Gaia's Cradle, and have it come into play untapped, and immediately tap it for a bunch of mana. Like it does some really.
Do you want Gaia's Cradle?
No, not necessarily, but I'm just saying it plays really well with Gaia's Cradle and other lands like that. I see no reason to not play this in every deck from monocolor to 5 color. My only question is, how much do you care about that colorless like kicker? Because that's the one. My only.
I will never do.
Like you just don't even care.
Unpassable.
Because I'm like my 5 color deck. I'm probably not gonna have a colorless source most likely. If you look at most of my 5 color mana bases,
what? Reliquary Tower.
Okay, maybe I have one Reliquary Tower perhaps, but like the odds of me having a colorless source not very high. I still think it's good enough, right? If you just play this like a Solemn and pretend the kicker doesn't exist, it's still good enough.
I don't plan on kicking it.
This is interesting to me because the card is a reference to another card that I haven't seen anybody really playing for a very long time, at least. Reap and Sow. It's the same cost. It's a sorcery. And it's the main difference is it doesn't have that colorless requirement. It doesn't come with a creature because it's a sorcery, so it doesn't come with a 3/3 body, which I don't think is super relevant, but it is a nice bonus.
That's a big deal.
It doesn't exile the land. It doesn't. Well, it's not like an ETB trigger, right? So I don't think you can't like reanimate it. You can't bounce it. You can't blink it or anything. Well, you can bounce it and recast it, but also you don't have to get colorless mana to actually utilize this ability, which I think is actually a downside. I don't know. It exiles his land. It is a slight upgrade, but I don't think anybody's been clamoring about Reap and Sow, right?
I just
But I
forgot it
do play
existed,
Pierce
or I
Whim.
would play it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I play Pierce Whim as a 4-mana ramp and non-basic. I don't actually care about you sacking artifacts or enchantments, by the way, that wrecks copy land. But like I just play that just to go 4 mana, ramp a Temple of the False God and call it a day. Right? Or a ramp a bounce land, get back in MDFC. So attached to a body is super relevant. And it's really relevant because like green has the 5 and 6 mana draw based on power, right? And you can go straight from this into card draw. Like you can go Disciple of Fraelis and sack it, gain 3 life, draw 3. That's something, right? And a 3/3 is like enough to keep little Toskies and other things from pecking at you. So I think this is good.
Plus,
Better. It is better.
Plus, it has Devoid, so not gonna get like
Block the sword.
hibernation. Not happening.
You can block a sorted creature. which is
Yeah,
the 4
sword
was-
creature.
right?
No.
I was so bummed because I have a Verazol kicker deck that I thought was going to be, finally we get like some kicker upgrades for the deck. And I was so hyped. But then I found out, first of all, I have like no colorless sources to actually cast this spell. And I was thinking, no, it's fine. I'll add colorless sources. It's that good. It's good enough to do that. And then I realized it's like the copy trigger wouldn't copy the cast trigger, so it doesn't even matter. I was just copy a 33 body, and I was so bummed out when I saw that. It's a good card. I think it's better than Reap and Sow. But yeah, I think the colors kind of hurt. Like it's actually hard for me to cast it in most of my decks.
I mean, I'm assuming that doesn't even exist. Like I'm not warping my mana base to add colorless to get that one in.
That's like the main difference between our mana bases.
Seth,
Mm.
hit us with a card.
I got a good one. This is a card I have heard zero people talk about, and I think this card actually could be like stapley good, where you can play in any deck. And that card is Shadow of the Second Sun. So Shadow of the Second Sun, 6-mana enchantment. You enchant a player. It says at the beginning of enchanted player's post-combat main phase, there's an additional beginning phase, which is untap, upkeep, and draw step. So essentially, what this card does is on your second main phase, it will untap all of your stuff, all your lands, all your mana rocks, and also draw you an extra card. So it is like Wilderness Reclamation on steroids, essentially. It's like Sword of Feast and Famine. You know how powerful it is when you hit with Sword of Feast and Famine and you feel so good about untapping all of your lands and you're able to like just deploy your hand? It's doubling your mana every single turn, and it's doing it at a functional time. It's doing it at a functional time.
You don't get another main phase. You don't get another main phase. It's actually Wilderness Wreck. Right?
Yeah,
Whereas
I'm
at the end of the
sorry.
turn, you untap everything and you have to play
Yes.
instants. Whereas Sword,
Yeah.
you get another main phase to cast more sorceries.
The wording is really weird on this one, and I have a WhatsApp group where we were discussing this card, and we all like misunderstood it. At the beginning of Enchanted Player's post-combat main phase, this will trigger. There is an additional beginning phase after this phase.
Yeah.
So you go to your second main after combat. This will trigger, and it will say after this second main phase, we will get another beginning phase, and it'll go straight to the end step.
Oh, this
Yeah,
card
you
sucks.
don't
this
get to
is,
use
this is
sucks.
Wilderness Wreck or
Aw.
Seedborn Muse
I
or like something,
know.
one of those effects, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not-
No, it's
It is,
this card- okay.
really,
I take
it
it.
is a confusing.
All right, you gonna mulligan?
wording, like,
you gonna mulligan? What's
All right, let's-
Yeah, you wanna swap it out? I'm putting it in my Zedger deck, by the way. I still love
edit
it.
this out, editor. Edit this
if
out.
you
Make
care
it look
about
smart.
a second upkeep, like
No,
it's
keep it in.
relevant,
It's-
right?
This is a good PSA. This is a good PSA.
I guess it is.
Put it inside Drew.
It is a good. Okay, put it inside Drew. All right, let's try this again. I got a really good card that I'm super hyped for, and it's not Shadow of the Second Son, because apparently that card actually sucks. That card is Abstruse Appropriation. So I know we're not the biggest fans of targeted removal here on Commander Clash, at least not all of us, but I think this is a really good targeted removal spell. So it is 4 mana Orzhov instant, except technically it's colorless because it's devoid. And then it says exile target non-land permanent. You can cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you can spend colorless mana as well as mana of any color to cast this spell. So this is in Utter End, essentially 4 mana, exile a permanent, same as Utter End, except you can actually cast whatever you exile with it. Yes, you do have to have the right colors of mana or colorless mana to cast it, which is a bit of a downside. It doesn't like completely fix your mana, but still most of the time you should be able to, with a mana rock or by targeting a permanent in the colors that you have, be able to cast that spell. So I think this is just a really good removal spell. I know 4 mana is not efficient, but it does hit anything except for lands, and then the ability to essentially steal the thing that you exile, I think that makes it worth it. It isn't a Swords to Plowshares that's just like putting you down a card to get rid of something. This is actually going to end up giving you that card most of the time. So I think this one's worth playing in a lot of decks.
It also gets around protection, which is
Devoid.
Nice because, like,
Swords.
I have an
it's
equipment
actually
deck,
relevant.
and I run all the swords. Yeah, it is Akroma's Will. You know, like if
Got him.
maybe an Akroma's, you kill something with Akroma's Will afterwards, and that actually keeps you alive. Like that is relevant. I like having the void on it. I don't.
Is it too much mana?
A lot of it. It's too much mana. Like also, like I love the fact that you get to cast the thing afterwards, but then you have to pay the mana for that thing afterwards, and then most of the time, the thing that you're going to be getting rid of doesn't synergize with your own deck. So, you know,
But you,
It's like Hostage
I think
Taker,
the idea,
which we see, like Krim loves Hostage Taker. We see Hostage
Yeah.
Taker from time to time, but you're paying more mana for the ability to get some card advantage, right? Like to snag whatever you're stealing. But I want my removal to keep me alive. And like Generous Gift is already hard enough to cast. Like so like adding an additional mana to it is like getting very difficult. So I'd rather just have the most efficient keep me alive card, and then the rest of my deck will win me the game, rather than trying to like mush it into one card. Unless my card, you know, I'm playing Prospers. I don't, it's not Prosper colors, right? But like you have Exile
Yeah.
Matters, or you know, something going on with this.
how
Would
much?
you would
I
replace
also-
Generous Gift? You gonna replace swords with this? You
Well,
play swords
no,
now, right?
I'm just gonna throw it in as an extra removal spell, and I can justify it because I get to steal the card. So it's a way I can get an extra removal
draws
spell
you
in my
cards.
deck. Yeah, it draws a card technically. I mean, is it really that bad? It wasn't that long
Would you
ago
play?
that-
Would you
no,
play
it's not bad.
Generous Gift if it was 4
I-
mana? Do the same thing, draw a card. Would you play that over like actual Generous Gift?
you said draw a card.
It does
Like
say
literally
draw
draw
a
a card.
card.
Like Generous
Yeah.
Gift.
You can
but
make it-
one
you can
more
make it
mana
6
and draw a
mana.
card.
Yeah,
I think I would
probably.
decline that. I think I would decline that.
I think this card, the stonks of this goes up a lot if you're in a deck in a metagame that has a lot of like people who run a lot of like good stuff decks. Because I think that's like the common thing with theft in general. Like if you see metagames where everybody's running like good stuff deck, they're running their Ristic Study, they're running their Smothering Tide, they're running a lot of stuff that just like will help any deck no matter what you put it in, then something like this is going to get way better. Because like if I'm in a metagame where I know everybody's running Smothering Tide, everybody's running Ristic Study, everybody's running like just like these powerful staples that is going to benefit me just as much as anybody else, then yeah, I'm totally 100% slam dunking this, because yeah, I get to remove a Ristic Study and get it for myself. Like that's a great deal. But like if you're in like a very
costs you 4
synergy
mana,
heavy,
but yes.
but whatever. I like it's worth it for like
you could have
such
just played
powerful
the
cards.
Smothering Tide from your hand, from your deck for 4 mana and called it a day.
Oh,
too.
I'm running the Smothering Tide too. Now it's double the chances of finding it. Like some cards are worth like the excess mana to cast, and I think like that's where it's fun. But if it's like synergy focus, like if I'm gonna exile like a really powerful goblin off a Krenko deck, it's like, okay, well, I don't care about that goblin, you know? It's like
We're gonna go off the rails here with some ancient card. I think it's Steel Enchantment. It's like double blue, gain control target enchantment. I feel that's severely underrated. And if your plan was to do something like this, I feel that is hot. Like you're like Smothering Tide, like 2 mana. I got Smothering Tide, right? I dealt that's like versus 8 mana to do this. But of course, that's only limited to enchantments, right? But like control magic would be for creatures. Agent of Treachery would be for anything. but like a steal effect
Is
might
Steel
accomplish
Enchantment
this too.
playable?
No.
I think Steel Enchantment is very playable.
For
No.
2 mana, is it worth it?
You
I
can,
kind of
for
want
2
to
mana, you
buy
can
it now.
snag Seth's land.
It's getting better, yeah, now
Yo,
that I'm playing copy like
I
that,
run
yes.
I run Thieving Skydiver in way too many blue decks, and that's a steal. That steals an artifact for too much mana. And this one is just like flat, just 2 mana, steal whatever. Is there enough enchantment?
That's the
Like if you
problem,
play a lot
right?
of white
They're enough
players, you can take
enchantment.
Trouble in Pairs, Smothering Tide. Like there's a lot of good
Yeah.
white things. Red or not red, white,
Land
blue,
taps.
Ristic Study, right? Like,
Yeah.
all right, we have strayed from the path of Modern Horizons 3. Tomer, hit us with a
tasty.
card.
Okay, this really hurts because like I'm Mr. Basics, and there's yet another one that I'm just like, gosh, I'm gonna have to take out a mountain for this one. And it's another land called Arena of Glory. So Arena of Glory, just like the Spymaster Vault, is part of a cycle, monocolor cycle. This one enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain, and you can tap it to add 1 red mana, and you can activate it by paying a red and tapping it and exerting Arena of Glory to add 2 red mana. And if that mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains haste until end of turn. And exerting is a Amonkhet mechanic that says an exerted permanent won't untap during its next untap step. So basically, this is a land that enters the battlefield untapped. It taps for 1 color. And its activation cost actually doesn't put you down a mana when you activate it. You spend a red and tap it to get 2 red back, and then you can spend that mana, give something haste. So you're actually not down any mana, and you could actually potentially haste 2 creatures. Yeah, you could potentially, if you spend that red mana on 1 creature and then another red mana on another creature, you can haste 2 creatures on the same turn. And then the next turn, you're down a mana because it won't untap that turn. Compared to the other ways of giving your creatures haste in red, I think there's like 2 that come to mind. There's one that's like a Kindred Elemental, that if you reveal an elemental, it comes into play untapped, and you have to pay like red and then tap it and then give something haste, so you're actually down a mana on it. And then there's another one that's colorless, and you have to pay red and tap it. So you're actually down a mana to actually give it haste, whereas this one is not down a mana and can haste possibly 2 things, but then you're down 1 mana next turn. That's so much better than the other ones. It's like the best haste enabler on a land they've ever printed. It's actually bananas, because I would so much rather be mana efficient on my turn now than mana efficient next turn. Because next turn, you know what? I'm playing another land. So each requirement for mana is getting less and less every single turn. So I'd much rather have that land and explosiveness now as opposed to later. And then thinking about I have so many commanders that have like combat triggers or attack triggers or something like that it's so important to give them haste. So just having a land that I can immediately like cast my commander with that land and, fully tap out to do so. I don't have to have extra mana to give it haste or whatever, and then immediately attack. It could be like straight up just game winning. Like I don't run like Narset, for example, but like if you give Narset haste, like that's it. You win, right? So like that's how powerful a haste enabler can be. And it's the most mana efficient one we've ever seen. And I have to take out a mountain for it. I feel so bad. Oh, what have I become?
I don't know if I actually like this card that much. I feel like there's a hidden cost to exerting your land, which is you don't have the information for next turn. With the other lands that give haste, if you have the extra mana laying around, you can just kind of be like, whatever, I might as well give my thing haste. Like, I'm not using this mana this turn. But doing that with this, it feels like there's a pretty high cost, right? Where you're like, okay, might as well just give something haste because I got this untapped land. And then the next turn, you might actually need that mana, but you don't know that at the time when you're making the decision. So I feel like the fact that you don't have the information on how much you need that mana during your next turn is going to make it harder to use than it looks at first glance. Like, I'm very skeptical of lands that don't untap. I cannot think of a single. There's several throughout Magic's history, and I've always considered them to be among the worst lands in Magic's history. I'm very skeptical that lands that don't untap will actually be strong. Even though I agree with your argument about, like, the upfront cost is very low, but the future cost, you're kind of borrowing from your future manas to like pay for it now. So if you're winning the game, it's fine. But if you're just doing it to like haste in my solemn or something, I don't know about taking that loan. The interest
combat triggers. You wouldn't pay that cost, right? But Tomer sold me. I thought this card was doo-doo because I'm like, exert. Why would I want to exert my land and then not untap? But it's the same 1 mana cost, right? And Tomer's argument that a mana today is worth more than a mana in the future. He's teaching us economics here. This is economics 101, right? Like $1 today is worth more than that same dollar in the future. And it's the same dollar. It's not like you're paying $2 today and 1 in the future or anything like that, right? It's actually just 1-to-1 plus the upside that this color fixes, plus the upside that it can haste 2 creatures at some point, right? I think this is straight up the best haste enabler land. You have like Hammer Battlements, you have Hall of Bandit, which costs you life. I think there's one more land. There's one more land that does the same thing.
Flamekin Village.
Yeah, Flamekin Village. This is the best one.
So okay,
Slayer Stronghold, but that's like 3 mana.
So here's my question for you believers in this land then. The black land we talked about, the Connive one, I could see jamming that in just any deck that has a bunch of swamps. Are you just jamming this in any deck that has a bunch of mountains? Or is this, I'm trying to haste in my Narset, I have like a very specific plan for this card. So that's my question, because I can get behind that. If it's like, I really need to haste in certain things, then yeah, this is probably the best way to do it. And it's probably worth the cost of not untapping your land the next turn. But you don't just run it for value, right? Just because I got a bunch of mountains in my deck? Or do you?
I mean...
Depends.
Yeah.
So if I'm playing like Ancient Copper Dragon, and I'm not a haste deck, right? I'm just randomly playing Ancient Copper Dragon. Like I have attack triggers, but I'm not specifically a haste deck. I would play this, right? But I wouldn't. Like if I'm just playing 5C random garbage, like no, I wouldn't put this in. But if I have a very important commander that needs to connect, I think basically if a deck would warrant Lightning Greaves, I would put this in. And then even some decks that don't warrant Lightning Greaves, like they just have random like old Gnawbones or Ancient Copper Dragons or whatever, like I would put this in. And then if you're any kind of like Najeela combo attacky deck, this definitely goes in. So this is pretty close to, this is like an A. This is a very strong A. It's the best haste enabling land, I think. Tomer sold me. That was the best sales pitch I've ever heard in my life.
Richard, just remember you sold me before I use this word because I know you're going to hate it. But tempo. Okay, no. Okay, hear me out. I'm putting it in basically all my red decks because all my red decks either care about attacking or tapping. For example, there's one that's not attacky focused. It's my Myra deck. My Myra deck really wants to come out and then as soon as possible start imprinting spells onto my attraction. I'm not going to explain what attractions are. That's going to take way too long. But just trust me, she needs to tap to do it. And I want to do it the turn I cast her. Yeah. This is the most mana efficient way to get her out and then still have mana left over to tap her, activate her imprint cost, start getting that value immediately. And I want to do that as early as possible. I also have like an Inti deck, which is like, it has a powerful attack trigger, but I also need to have mana afterwards. After I cast Inti, I want to attack with him or, do whatever with him, or haste out other creatures with him, and then still have some mana left over to use that mana afterwards for the impulse draw. So like I want to get attacking as quickly as possible, and the earlier turns that I can attack with my value commanders, or tap with them, the more value I'm going to accrue throughout that entire game. So like I want to have as much mana as possible the turn I actually activate this thingy, and this is like why I love it so much more. And then the next turn, yeah, sure, I'm gonna have one less mana and the possibilities, but like I want to get that as quickly as possible. I want to get my value as quickly as possible so I can get the most value over the entire turn, the entire game. And then also I'm going to have another land drop next turn. So I'm going to have more mana to work. I'm going to have a net amount of mana to work with next turn anyway, like as the turn I have this turn. If that makes sense.
You have the same amount of mana, right? So if you do it on 3, then you won't be able to make a 4-drop. You're still stuck at 3-drop for another turn. But in theory, the land drop does help. I don't know. I'm not a believer. I'm sticking with my Flamekin Village, my good old Flamekin Village. You kids in your fancy new arenas. You need that
elemental,
right? Yeah,
you need
an elemental. Battlements enters untapped, right? But
actually, I think honestly, this is a land that I might play, but I imagine I will not activate often because I might need that mana. Just like paying for Ristic studies. You can't do it. You never know when you might need that mana.
I am debating putting it in just Dousing Dagger decks. Because you know what's sad? When you Dousing Dagger on 2 and you have no creature, but now on 3, you can play you can play
Dagger.
a 1-drop and ace it, and then equip the dagger and go.
That
And then
makes
you
up for
get
the
the
mana.
you get the Lotus Veil land, which makes up for the lands. I don't know if that's worth it, because in reality, if you're mono red, you're competing with Mountain, doesn't matter, right? In reality, you're competing with like 18 MBFCs and dual lands and stuff like that. So I don't know if it
Yeah.
makes the cut if it's not critical to your game plan.
The
because-
only red deck. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
I got it, because we got to cut all the basics to play Planar Nexus, which is my choice.
No, what?
It's a land. It is every non-basic type. So that includes cave, desert, gate, lair, locust, mine, power plant, sphere, tower, and Urzas. You can tap it to add a colorless. You can pay 1 mana, tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Now, if you have a Tron land and you have this, you automatically have Tron, because this counts as all parts of Tron. So this still taps for 1 mana, but your tower taps for 3. The other 2 tap for 2. This lets you fetch a desert out of your deck. So if you're playing Sand Scout and you want to play additional deserts, you can play Planar Nexus. And I think I am seriously debating like playing a monocolor deck and just putting Tron in here, just because of Planar Nexus. Like you get 1 Tron land, and then you use Skittering Surveyor to ramp this one out to search it out, and then you just got a free Ancient Tomb, right? Like, am I going too far here?
No, I mean, there's certainly uses for it. I don't know. I'm just not sure how many decks you can put it in. That's kind of the question. Like, I think it's really powerful, but I've been trying to think like how many of my decks actually have deserts or gates or layers or locusts or spheres. Like, should I start adding those to my decks? I'm not sure, because a lot of them aren't very good, right? The Tron lands are good. Beyond that, what am I really powering up?
That's all you need. You need 3 colors in a 3-color deck. You have like 3 colorless lands, and then this, and then you're like, I can just randomly Tron up.
It probably depends on how good you are.
He was playing
Eldrazi. He was playing Eldrazi.
Yeah,
it looked very good in that game when he just turned on Tron and Krim like popped off with it. That was very impressive. So it certainly could do some work. I don't know about jamming in every deck though. That's risky.
It will
like Urza's Workshop is another one.
Sowing Mycospawn. That's for sure.
But
you need an artifact deck.
It also,
I think you need to be an artifact deck in like 1-2 colors. You know, like.
Yeah. It also is a desert in your deck, right? So you can find this with any of your gate tutors, desert tutors.
And then
Aaron kind of
Archway gives you a Surveil when you bounce Planar Nexus. It's 1/3 of the way to getting zombies with Hour of Providence.
I think this is like one of those that you have to like keep an eye on whenever there's like a new tutor up a certain lane type or something like that. Like I was like curious right now as we were talking, is there anything that tutors up spheres? Because it like mentions like in the card text sphere, and there's like Monument to Perfection, which is like a Journeyer's Kite. It's 2 mana, and you can pay 3 mana to like tutor up a sphere and put it into your hand, or a Locust land even, and that's cute. That's something.
This actually,
so like there can be potential, but like. Yeah,
it seems like it'll keep getting better as we keep getting more and more lands with unique types. Because even just recently, Wizards has kind of like embraced that. We've seen gates, we've seen the caves recently. So it seems like that's something Wizards is experimenting with more. I think I might play it a bit just because of Sand Scout. I feel like, so with Sand Scout, I usually want 3 deserts because I'm afraid I'm going to draw them and not have a target. And I feel like this might be desert number 3 for me, because you get the Bounce Desert, you get the Graveyard Exiling Desert, and the Scavenger Grounds. And then this is probably better than the Crime Desert, which has been my 3rd desert to tutor up. So I think this might be my 3rd desert for Sand Scout decks. And then I play Tron lands, and I just pop off.
Why don't we just play a color fixing desert though? You got to add the Tron lands to make it worth it. I think you got to add the Tron lands to make it worth it, or you got to do something great. Like you have to be playing gates or something, right? Like if you're playing a gate deck, I think. Actually, I don't even know if this makes the cut because there's so many gates now. But
Even beyond Tron, though, you get Cloud Post. That's another Tron land that you could play with it. Like, if you have this plus Cloud Post, you get an Ancient Tomb out of it. Maybe there's just enough incidental synergies that you... Although, if you don't find this or it gets blown up, your mana base is going to be so jank.
Yeah, I'm not...
One Tron piece, one Cloud Post.
In colorless decks, A+, I'm definitely running all Tron pieces anyway because the opportunity cost is so low. Outside of colorless, I don't think I'm running Tron lands. Are you guys running Tron lands? And outside of maybe tricky terrain?
I haven't
sort
found
of
the Clash theme to do it, but I'm trying to build a 1 or 2 mana, 1 or 2 color deck that's just like 3 mana sources, all colorless, and I play Forsaken Monument, Tron, Planar Nexus, all that. And it's still like a proper colored deck, but the majority of the mana is colorless. And then you can play like the pain lands that will give you color and colorless at the same time. So and this fixes color too. With your ample with your ample Tron mana, you could use it to sink one into this to make color mana if you need. So I'm looking out for this one. I don't know what we're gonna do with it, but it's intriguing that it's any type. Well, it's like a changeling, right?
Super
unique.
unique.
A changeling is so versatile.
It's doable.
This is a changeling land, so surely there's got to be something we can do with this. And eventually, someone will make Tomer's changeling deck with lands. So yeah.
Tricky
Terrain is a precon that's trying to do it, but it's not quite there yet. All right, Seth, hit us with a card.
Ooh. All right, I got to bring this one up because I think this card is interesting and it might be good, and I want your opinions on it. And that card is Argent Dais. So it's a 2-mana white artifact. Enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters on it. Whenever 2 or more creatures attack, put an oil counter on it. This is anyone's creature, so your opponent's attacking is going to trigger this too. And then you can pay 2 and tap it, remove 2 oil counters from it, exile another non-land permanent, and its controller draws 2 cards. So this card, it's a little wonky, right? When you first read it, it's kind of like an oblation almost. I guess your first activation, a little bit more expensive. You get to pay 2 to cast, 2 to activate, but then in theory it sits out and it's a repeatable oblation. So you can use this to get rid of whatever the most brutal thing is on the battlefield, and your opponent gets to draw a couple cards off of it. You can also use this like a weird, not exactly repeatable skull clamp if you're some sort of like token deck that has exposed. You know, you got permanent.
What is this? 2013. We need to do this.
Draw cards. Anything for cards. Literally anything that says draw cards. Seth was like, is this?
It draws
it's like the butterfly meme. It's like with Seth in the butterfly meme, and it's like it says draw a card. It's like, is this a new meta? Is this like the broken? Is this busted?
But this card's good, right? It's good. It's removal when you need it to be. It's card draw when you need it to be. You can use it every turn. The oil counters are going to stack up. You can proliferate on it if you want to. You guys don't like this card? No?
To appease the YouTube comments, this is exactly the card that gets you killed, right? Like, if you don't want to think too hard, think like a card like Royal Assassin. Okay, that's like a 3-mana creature, and you can tap it to kill a creature. And you can do that every turn. Every turn you can just kill something, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when you play Royal Assassin? Everybody's like, well, I can't play my good creatures anymore because the minute I play a good creature, it's going to get Royal Assassin. So
they have to be tapped, though. It's fine.
Oh, I guess Royal Assassin has an extra clause on it, right? But yeah. Like, assume you have the combo down, right? You will just get beaten in the face. Like, the minute you reveal a Wrath, for example, you boom pile and you miss, and the Wrath is just sitting on the table. Everyone's like, well, I'm not playing any more creatures. There's onboard removal, right? So I'm just going to either kill the boom pile or smash your face in until you're dead. Then I'll play the rest of my game. So
are you saying boom pile is bad, Richard? Is this the admission of truth?
No.
The boom pile is actually garbage.
It goes off every time when I play.
Fair.
But you can't play like Navinral's Disc or something. Like, all those things, like, just gives everyone the information, and then they're just not going to play their good threats anymore, and they're just going to try to kill you. So I think this is it. This is playing, it's like a seal, you know, like the seal of cleansing or whatever. It's like a disenchant, but you put it on the battlefield and you can sack it. Everyone sees it. No one's going to play their like awesome enchantment anymore, and if they care about it, they'll just remove you, right?
The 2 cards soften the blow, though, right? Don't the 2 cards, like, I'm thinking about it. I want to play my creatures into it, because then you exile them, I get 2 other cards, so I get to draw 2 cards. Like, every creature's a Muldrifter almost. Like, I evoked a Muldrifter no matter what I play.
If you didn't care, why would you remove their creature and give them 2 cards then, right? It has to be an Avengers level threat for you to remove, right? I actually think that this card is not as big of a hate magnet, and I'm a little bit closer with Seth. I don't think this card is good because it's so much mana and it requires a lot of stuff happening afterwards. I see it more as like, yeah, it's like soft removal. It's like kind of like when you arcane denial something, and it's like, oh well, at least I didn't get counterspelled. You know, like I feel like it is much more cuddly. And that's in a good way, cuddly in a good way, as in it's going to draw less hate because, like, at least you get something. My main concern with this is, like, it costs 4 mana for its first activation, and then you have to wait around for it to activate.
You need to recharge it.
Like, it'll happen.
So it's anyone
I'd read
attacks,
it
though,
like-
right? Anyone can. It's not you have to attack.
anyone.
Anyone
So
can
you
attack.
you
they
could
can
say-
attack anyone else. Yeah.
You can put stuff on it too. I think it would be good in like the Council of 4 if you like in decks that care about your opponents drawing cards. Then it's kind of cute. Good, not
You
great,
develop a
cute.
Food or a treasure, like some useless junk token, and get 2 cards out of
stop
it.
using
Into
it
it.
card draw. We have better card draw. 2024.
That's
Let's just play Mind's Eye. What are you
11.
doing? Just play
like,
Mind's Eye. If you're
It's
gonna
card
do
draw
this.
that can
Play good
also
cards.
remove the adventure level threat. It's like
Wait, do you
perfect.
play Ablation
Just run
anymore, Seth?
trouble in pairs.
Well, no, but it's not repeatable. This one's I can do it every turn. If I could Oblation every turn.
I mean, I sometimes
True.
play Ablation, but like, do I want like 4 Ablations in my deck? Probably not. But like a single one, fine, right?
This is better than Oblation, right? It's gotta be better
No.
than Oblation. No?
Ablation is instant speed that no one can see.
Well, this is still instant speed, but you gotta get on
I'm
the
just
battlefield
mad that
first,
this-
yeah.
And this one doesn't hit lands. Why, Wizard of the Coast? If you're listening to this, just let us hit lands, please. Stop with this non-lane cause. This would be 100% safe if we could just hit like a Field of the Dead with this. I would be actually on board with Seth. I'd be like, you know what? Now this you got me a little bit, but like
Crim's been on the
Yeah,
land
come on,
destruction.
just-
streak.
Oh my
I'm
God.
glad he's not here to hear this. I think I know why Wizards has
4
put this
mana
8 card.
target.
In play.
Yep.
There's no reason.
You want to draw
for
2
it.
cards? Here you
It's
go.
not
Let
like
me
you
just
can,
take all
like-
your lands.
No, but it's like it's 2 mana and tap it. It's not like I'm gonna like Armageddon you. You know, with this ability, I'm gonna take out 1 lane per turn. Maybe if I have enough infinite oil. It's like, oh come on, please.
That's pretty
Infinite
good, everybody.
oil.
Here, if you have infinite oil, I need infinite oil.
Infinite oil, infinite untapped, infinite mana. Like, come on.
All right,
alone.
it's over. Hit us with a card that doesn't need infinite oil.
Something that will actually give you not infinite oil, but it will give you more oil to activate it. So maybe it's a combo. This card is Dreamtide Whale. It's a 3 mana blue 7/5 whale. Yes, that's right. It's a 3 mana 7/5. It has Vanishing 2, which is an old mechanic that says ends the battlefield with 2 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter from it, and if it's the last one removed, sacrifice it. So you play it, it has 2 time counters on it, and then on the 3rd turn, you remove the last one, and it will be sacrificed, right? But no, because it has other text that says whenever a player casts their 2nd spell each turn, proliferate. So you get to just add another time counter onto this, so you just keep the thing around, and then you get to put counters on all your other stuff. And let me tell you, I've played an Orzhov card, 2 mana, called like Lortho or something. It's like a Hobbit or whatever, and it makes treasures whenever somebody casts their 2nd spell. That thing pops off all the time. I'm getting treasures all day long. And you know what? So if I'm in a deck that cares about counters, like my poison deck, for example, I love counters there. Having a big old 7/5 on the battlefield that basically lives forever, and then every single turn cycle is just like proliferating 2, maybe even 3 times in a turn cycle, is nuts for 3 mana. It's nuts. So basically, if I'm in any deck that cares about counters, any type of counters, I'm slamming this. It's a 7/5 for 3 as well. Oh my goodness! Hello.
So I gotta.
You guys are not.
I
you guys are
gotta
not.
pull off the
These
Richard.
are disappointments.
I gotta do the
This
Richard
is like-
argument here.
You guys are not
Being a
happy with this one.
7/5 is a downside. It needs to be smaller
What?
because it's such a big body.
What?
It's gonna draw removal because people are gonna be afraid that it's gonna attack them and damage them. So I kind of wish it was like
But
a,
nobody
a
runs
2/2 or
removal.
something, because then
nobody
people
runs
might not kill it,
removal.
and I get to keep my whale longer to proliferate.
I don't think anyone's gonna be afraid of the
What?
75 body when you proliferate 8 times a turn. I think this is the strongest proliferate engine, right? Because even if everyone just passes the turn, when it gets back to you, vanishing 1, you proliferate it, it just goes around again. Like they need to actually remove this. They
Yeah.
can't like starve you out because you can feed it yourself. So this is like
Yeah.
this is Avengers level threat, right? Like everyone needs to remove this immediately. Can you win before that? I don't know. But this got to be the best proliferate engine, right? Is there a better one?
So I think
Like this is better than Atraxa,
Well,
right?
there's
Atraxa's once on end step.
I think it might be the best proliferator. There's also a 2-drop in the set that's whenever a non-token creature ETBs under your control proliferate, which I think is pretty good too. So that one has some like
Well, that's pretty.
combo potential if you're trying to proliferate a whole bunch of times in one turn.
the link.
This is really good at like repeatedly every turn it's going to be proliferating some amount. Like you should at least trigger it during your turn, and your opponents are going to trigger it sometimes. So if you want to like just repeatedly be adding counters to things, I think this is one of the best ways to do it. So I think it's really good for proliferate decks. I don't know how many decks, like, that's kind of a narrow subset of decks, right? Like, most decks won't want this, but in some decks, it's probably going to be one of the strongest cards in a deck.
This is
Yeah.
cracked in
There's
Super
better
Friends.
proliferate
It's a big
engines.
body to save your Super Friends while like just destroying everyone
Yeah.
with value. Although can you double spell in Super Friends? I don't know. Maybe you can't actually double spell in Super Friends efficiently. +1/+1 counters decks. I think you play this. And then infect decks, you play it. I think totally
Well,
right. This goes
my
actually
oil.
in a shockingly large number.
Infinite
of
oil.
deck.
Yes.
You actually
Even if
will
you're in a
have
+1/+1
infinite oil.
counter deck, I think you just run it, right? You just even in a +1/+1 counter deck, I think you run it. And also, if you're in the charge counter deck, Seth, I know you keep going for
Charge counter,
I
I would.
think this might be
I
able
do
to.
love charge counters. Yeah, this is actually really good
This
with
might
charge
actually bring it
counters.
over the top.
I don't know if I
Why
play
did it have to be a 7?
I like
counters.
this
Maybe.
mana
Why is it so
free.
big? Like I don't mean like
Because
is
it will
that too
die.
good? You're
eventually.
beating someone's face with a 7/5 while you're like quadruple proliferating every turn. Like what?
So you gotta remember, it's Modern Horizons 3. I think this card is much worse in 1v1 formats because I've seen many Ledger Shredders not trigger for 2 turns and just die. So I think it's like designed to maybe have a chance to see play in Modern, but it kind of abuses the fact that you have 4 players in a game of Commander, so someone's probably going to double spell. So I think it like just scales really well with Commander, but was designed for Modern. Good card, though.
It's not like the best proliferate engine, but it's the most mana efficient one. Maybe Radstorm.
It's gotta be the best, right?
But
Wait,
whatever.
Radstorm is Storm proliferate, right?
Storm proliferate for 4
I feel this
mana.
is
that
like
one's pretty.
the most the most efficient, but it's over time. And there are certain ones that can get you many proliferates on one turn, but as a this is like Ristic Study, right? Like it just generates value every turn, insane value, but there's better burst card draw theoretically, right? But I'm with Tomer on this.
And it saves your face from being punched a lot when you're playing poison. I feel like, oh yeah, I am poisoning you, and I am the baddie, but I have a 7/5, so good luck attacking me.
I like that.
Deal with it.
And it's only 3 mana. You can get this down super early.
Pretty cheap.
Heck
Okay.
yeah.
Well, those are our underrated Modern Horizons 3 cards. We still have a long list of cards that
So
are
many
very
cards.
This set is like insanely cracked. So let us know if we missed any of your favorite pet cards. Hit me with the economics arguments. I love Tomer's 1 mana today is worth more than 1 mana tomorrow. I love it. I love it.
Tempo.
No, that's not tempo.
Tempo.
It actually is tempo.
Tempo.
I think you sold me on tempo, Tom.
Hey, literally, this is my play style set, Chris. This is my play style, Richard. I am the tempo player. This is how I play. I love it. Come to the dark side, Richard.
I like investing my mana. It's like Seth invests his mana into card draw. We just invest mana for hasty creatures and more.
You know, the next step is replacing all those tap lands because they are anti-tempo, Richard. You know, that is the second step of this tempo playstyle.
The
land today is better than land tomorrow.
Yeah, so there you have it. Tempo investment strategies from the MTG Goldfish Commander Clash podcast. Let us know what cards we missed. Any more sweet cards? I need some more cards to sneak into my commander decks. So I love the comments. They always give us some like hot tech. So drop them below, and then we'll see y'all back next time.